And we try and reach out to the people. There's a call out for Balabatim, and we reach out to the lone soldiers, we reach out to all kinds of people. We see there's a need to help and everything else. And clearly, there's a need to help those people who are finding their shidduch, to give them some assistance. And we know that the Gemara tells us that when a person is called into the higher world and he's asked 4 questions, 5 questions, one of the questions he's asked, Asapta v'piri v'rivya. Did you deal with the matter of procreation? And the Marashah tells us this means, did you marry off a Yosam and a Yisoma? Did you marry off somebody who hasn't got parents? And I think that a lot of the singles who have a difficulty in finding a shidduch, the mentors have to be their parents, and I'm quite sure this would be an explanation, interpretation of this when we do this chesed. The Gemara tells us that every single chesed which we do, we get rewarded for it. And there's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah which tells us that Abaye and Rava were the descendants of Eli, and they died at a very early age. And it says that Rava, who only studied Torah, lived till 40 years. Abaye, who also did chesed, lived till 60 years. All the chesed we do, and this is one of the greatest chesed we can do, we can mentor people, will only add to our life and add to our quality of life and help Klal Yisrael. Without further ado, without any introduction, I'll call upon Rabbi Dr. Tursky.
You're so comfortable. Good evening, everyone. In his epical work, can you hear back there? Everybody here? Yeah. In his epical work, Mesilas Yesharim, Ramchal begins by saying that you're not going to find any information in this book that you don't know. There's nothing on it, nothing new. And he suggests that you reread the book many times, because the purpose of the book is to remind you of things that you already know. I have a feeling that I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't know. But maybe it's good that we review it anyway, because we are dealing with the most important subject. I think the 2 primary issues that we're discussing are very closely related. The one problem of the disastrous, unprecedented number of failed marriages. Divorce in the frum community has now become, it's not an overstatement to say, epidemic. A friend of mine told me that when he goes to a wedding and he gives a gift, he dates the check 6 months ahead. They're still married at the end of 6 months, they can cash it. And the problem of shingles, which is a very painful problem, and there may be some similarities between the 2 of them. I think that the gravity of the problem is such that it cannot be approached with any band-aids. And I think we're going to have to play hardball and deal with some very difficult issues. There is no immunity. We live in a secular world, and even though we would like to think that the Torah world is totally different, the fact is that there are fortunately some differences. There's also too many similarities. We're living in a world that is unprecedentedly hedonistic. In the American Declaration of Independence, it says that one of the inalienable rights of man is the pursuit of happiness. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Except that in our day and age, this is interpreted as pursuit of pleasure. And people have this concept that happiness consists of getting the maximum of pleasure and avoiding any discomfort, inconvenience, which has given rise to this epidemic of drug addiction, as a result of which many people, especially young people, are looking for the pleasure and the high of drugs. And so we are constantly told what to do to get more pleasure out of life. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with pleasure. The mistake is when pleasure becomes a goal in life. And when pleasure becomes a goal in life, the Talmud was very right in saying that's a bottomless pit. You can never get enough. And hoping that pleasure will give you happiness is doomed to failure. There's just not enough pleasure that ever going to satisfy anyone. So it's wonderful to have pleasures. We should all have many, many simplest and many pleasures, but not make the serious mistake of thinking that pleasure is going to give you happiness. I mean, I have a whole list of people that I've seen in my career. If only this, I'd be happy. If only I had this, I'd be happy. If only I had this. And I watched them getting everything and remaining as miserable as they were. So living in a culture, and by the way, when I say that the frum world is not immune, there's this famous Ramban in Pasha Kedoshim where the title says, Kedoshim Tihiyu. And the Ramban says, what does that mean? What does that mean to be holy? So the Ramban comes up with this famous phrase, that it is possible for an individual to be technically in compliance with every single passage of the Torah. Every single mitzvah, or say every mitzvah, or say every minig, every derabanan, and to be in total compliance, and yet to be a naval b'rshus HaTorah, a very crude and vulgar person, although he's doing everything kosher. And so we have now a goth kosher everything. And even though I don't go back centuries, I do go back about 80 years. And I remember what life was like 80 years ago. And it wasn't the pleasure thing that we have now. And there have been many changes that have happened as a result of this burgeoning of the logistics and the technicalities of the electronic age. So one factor is, if we are searching for pleasure, then anything that intrudes upon that pleasure is going to take away from our happiness. Right? And there's so many things that can take away from pleasure. Right? So if we have a goal of happiness rather than pleasure, okay. But if we seek pleasure, then anything that becomes an obstacle to pleasure becomes an obstacle to happiness. As an aside, and maybe it's really not an aside, how many of us have paid attention to the brochas at the chuppah? You know, a young couple gets together, have ayat, now they're husband and wife. What's the first bracha? Shahakol ba'a lechvoda. What in the world does that have to do with marriage? I mean, it's a very fine bracha. It just means to be totally irrelevant. And the answer is that if you have two people, each one with their own personal needs, and each one with their preferences, and each one seeking to gratify their own needs, then you have to run into conflict. You know, sometimes people say that there's areas of difficulties in communication. I was once at an airport, and there was the walking, moving sidewalk, and I was standing near an airport employee, heading on this moving sidewalk going that way, and he happened to see another airport employee who was on the adjacent parallel one going this way. Right? They exchanged a few words, but they couldn't exchange more than a few words because he was over here, she was over here. Right? They didn't have any problems in communication. They were just going in two different directions. Right? So the problem may not be one of communications, but that there's not any unanimity of direction. And I think that's why the Chazal said, look, you want the marriage to work? Then yes, you have your needs, and you have your needs, but if you're going to attend to both of those as primary, you're going to run into conflict. The one thing that's going to tie us together is shahakol bo'el chavod. If the goal of marriage is going to be kvod shamayim. Yes, you may have differences in needs, but they're not going to be a break in the foundation. The foundation of the marriage is going to be kvod shamayim. A corollary to that is something that I think is extremely important. We're talking about seduchim, marriages, and I'm going on for the next step, and that is the basis of a family and children. And I have made the statement that once you bring a child into the world, right, you have forfeited the right to have priority of your own gratification. Children did not ask to be into this world. It's a crazy world, full of stress, full of anxiety. They didn't ask to come. And we decide to bring them into the world. Then we have an obligation, an absolute obligation, to give them the most opportunity to make their lives happy and successful. Meaning, if there are two parents, right, I don't care what their needs are anymore. Right? The primary needs is no longer what you want or what you want. The primary need is, what can I do for the ultimate happiness of my child? Which means a lot of sacrifice. And that's one thing that does not sit well in a hedonistic world, which is pleasure-oriented. Pleasure-oriented does not condone sacrifice. So we have a secular culture, which is pleasure-oriented, and a frum culture, which unfortunately is often pleasure-oriented, with very few people really committed to sacrifice. And then there's other cultural things, right? Let me just ask you something. Can I have a pen for a moment? That one. Look at that. I think this is one of the causes of the problems of marriages and divorce. You see, when I was bar mitzvah, I received a fountain pen. There were no ballpoint pens. Right? And it was an important item for me. I had it for close to 30 years. And when I lost it, I felt something valuable was lost. And incidentally, if you had asked me to give, if somebody asked me, could I borrow your pen? I would do it this. I'm not going to give him this. I want that back. All right? Today, I don't know where you got this pen from. It makes no difference. In all likelihood, by the end of the week, you won't have it. So, we have pens that are disposable. Look what I have here. Disposable. Chad pa'ami. Chad pa'ami. Everything is disposable. I remember carrying a radio to the radio shop to have it repaired. You can take a radio or a recorder or one of these to get it repaired, and they'll look at you and say, you're crazy. You don't repair those. If they don't work, you throw them away, throw it away and get another one. I remember we used to do diapers. We didn't have disposable diapers. Contact lenses are disposable. Cameras are disposable. Everything is disposable. What about repairing something? What do you mean repair? You don't repair. Huh? Got a problem with it? Throw it away. Throw it away and get another one. Now, you may think that that has nothing to do with marriages. I think it has a great deal to do with marriages. Because one of the things that the Torah tells us is that how we relate to objects is how we relate to people. So Moshe Rabbeinu was told that to inflict the Makas Dam, so Hashem said, no, you can't do that. Right? The river once, the Nile once gave you an abode and once gave you protection when you were an infant in the basket. Aaron will have to do that. Right? What do you mean? The river has feelings. You have to respect the river. Yeah, you have to respect the river. You have to have a feeling of gratitude toward the river. You have to have a feeling of gratitude toward objects as well as toward people. Yeah. But we've lost that. We've lost that. So a disposable item, marriage has become a disposable item. So you take all of these things together and you see where we are essentially doomed to frustration. Okay? You take two people, each with individual needs. Because of the hedonistic nature, both have been seeking for their happiness and for pleasure. You put them together, and all of a sudden, one demands from the other. You know, the Stapano said it so beautifully when he talked about the problems of young men in marriage. And he says, what do you want from this young man? For the last 15 years, he has not had any relationship except with his shtender. The shtender doesn't make any demands. Put it here, put it there. Where do we give people, where do we give our youngsters a paradigm that they have to consider other people's demands? Yes, there's chesed, but this is not what we're talking about chesed. We're talking about relationships and consideration. And those things have been hard to come by. Compassion and consideration. And what about love? Well, you know what the problem with love is. The problem with love is what the Kotzker said it was. When the Kotzker saw a young man eating fish, it was a tasty dish, he went up to him and he says, young man, why are you eating the fish? The young man says, why? Because I love fish. He says, oh, because you love fish, that's why you took it out of the water and killed it. Don't tell me you love fish. You love yourself. Right? And because the fish tastes good, so you eat it, but you don't love fish. What modern society has thought of as love is essentially fish love. Right? I love you because you please me. Right? When you stop pleasing me, we're in trouble. Now, some people who are experts in marriage say that, yes, the kind of pleasure that initiates marriage, which is, quote, one quote, chemistry, whatever that means, lasts anywhere from 18 months to 3 years, and then it's over with. Right? And then you have to start looking for some real relationships. I may have told you this, or you may have read it in one of my books, that I witnessed the relationship, a marriage relationship, the only really marriage relationship that was really intimate to me, which was my parents' relationship. And my parents did not fall in love. They couldn't have, because my father saw my mother the first time after the chuppah, not before. used to ask him, what about the Gemara that says that can't marry a woman till you have seen her? Oh, he said, the night before the chuppah, there was a little gathering. The men were in one room, the women were in the other room. And somebody went over and they pointed out to me, they said, there's the Kala. I said, to this day, I don't know who I saw. So it was not a marriage of, quote, infatuation. And there was a great deal of stress in that first few marriage. Right? Personal things that I can't go into. Never understood how that marriage worked. But I'll tell you how I found out much later what the nature of the marriage was. My father was very knowledgeable in medicine. In fact, it's one of the reasons I think that I became a doctor, because it was his secret wish. And he used to visit hospitals every day and was very familiar with medical issues and talked with physicians all the time. And then when he found out that he had cancer of the pancreas, and this was in 1973, he said to me, chemotherapy doesn't do anything for cancer of the pancreas, does it? You know, chemotherapy can be extremely effective for some types of malignancies. It can be curative, but pancreatic cancer is not one of them. So I said, no. So he says, then all I get is, if I do chemotherapy, is I will get a lot of the side effects without any of the benefits. I said, that's right. He says, well, that doesn't make any sense. So let's just get clear about it, that we're not going to go into chemotherapy. I said, you're right. Meanwhile, my mother spoke to the doctor, and the doctor said to her, there's not much we can do for the rabbi. We might try chemotherapy, we may get another 3 months. And my mother said, 3 months? For 3 days you have to do it. And so she came into father's room and essentially read him the riot act. And after she left, my father said to me, I'm sorry that the doctor gave her some misinformation. He says, it's not going to give me any 3 months. But he says, you know, if I refuse the chemotherapy, then when I die, Mother is going to say, if only I had set my foot down and insisted on it, he could still be alive. And she'll feel guilty that she didn't insist. I don't want her to feel guilty. So I'll take the chemotherapy, so whatever the side effects are. Right? I said, there have been many things that I did for Mother, so this will be one more thing, the last thing. And this was a relationship that began with her seeing him for the first time after the chuppah. Something happened, and it wasn't infatuation. It was Shehakol Bo Lechoydei. This was a marriage which was based upon the fact that they both had a similar goal, right? A unified goal. And their unified goal also was their children. And I can't go into all the details of it, but a little bit of my book, Gevulos, gives a little bit of a background as to what my upbringing was like and what my parents were like. So that's a far cry from what many situations are today, okay? Where people are looking, what's going to please me? Okay? And this is true both in marriages, and it's true also in shidduchim. And you hear a lot about chemistry, and I don't deny that chemistry is a factor. But does it have to be 85% or 90% of the factor? And I think that if we could learn more about a goal in life both for ourselves and for the children, as Shahakal and de-emphasize our own wants and our own needs. Right? Then I think that we have a much better chance, first of all, of making a good shidduch, and secondly, of marriages lasting. Now, those are just some tips of the iceberg. There's so many other things that affect a relationship, and that is the family of origin. And how important is it to satisfy what the family wants? How many parents fail to know what the child really needs? And how could they when there's so, unfortunately, little contact with the children? So, parents provide for their children. Very often, both parents have to be working in order to make the budget, which is understandable. But while they work hard to give their children things, they don't give the children themselves. And so you know the story about the youngster who asked his father, the psychiatrist, how much he charges for a session. He said $150. So the child said, well, I've saved up some money. I have $150. Can I have an hour of your time? I mean, that may be just a jest, but it's unfortunately true. We are so busy providing for children, and the needs are great, I don't deny that. You know, then we have a tuition crisis. But the result of it is that parents often don't know their children. There are parents who are very fine people, but for whatever reasons are limited in their ability to share emotions with their children. And in some Jewish families, there is no such thing as sharing emotions. Almost as though emotions is a dirty word. Right? I once got myself into hot water, speaking to a group of Hasidic couples. And I said, you know, it's traditional that in Hasidic couples, the husband and wife do not show emotion in front of the children. They don't embrace, they don't kiss, they don't hug. That's just not done. And I said, you know, I'm not so sure that that's the way it should be. But at any rate, if you're going to absorb that, and you're going to adopt that traditional attitude of not manifesting affection and love in front of the children, then for heaven's sake, don't fight in front of them. And if you're gonna fight in front of them, then for heaven's sake, kiss and make up in front of them. But anyway, there are problems with emotion, and we're dealing in the culture which is soaked with physicality. And that's a whole other issue. I remember when I was 6 years old, I was not allowed on the beach as a 6-year-old child without a 2-piece bathing suit. Now, how different has the world become? And our children are exposed to kinds of physicality, and they grow up with that, and this has become the norm, okay, in from families. That's not the norm, so they don't have televisions, hopefully. But the television has been succeeded by the internet, and I don't have to tell you what that's all about. The disaster of what's happening with the internet. And you probably know most of what it's all about. You know that in America, for a few months ago, 40,000 yeshivas, Rosh Yeshivas, Rabbonim, Hasidim, etc., gathered to discuss the crisis of the internet. Well, they weren't concerned about the secular people. They were concerned about what's happening with the frum population. And it's an epidemic. But that's a totally separate issue. Not totally separate, but it is an issue which indicates that we're culturally doused with physicality. And we would like to think that the Torah world is different. So whether it's young man and young woman dating, or a husband and wife, I think that there may be some of the issues, or some of the factors are different, but there are many things that we've talked about. And like I say, if we're going to make some headway, we're going to have to try and teach our youngsters what it means to have compassion, what it means to have consideration, what it means to relate to another person, and sacrifice some of your own needs for the other person, right? Which I think is one of the major keys. But again, sacrifice is a terrible word when we are pleasure-oriented. So those are some of the high points. I'm sure that we could go on and discuss some of the details for hours and hours. But neither I want to do that, and neither do you want to hear it. So let's go on to the next speaker, who I'm sure will be able to give you some very valuable insights.
I'd like to thank Dr. Tursky very much for his talk, very illuminating. I'd also like to thank Rabbi Aaron Poston for arranging a lot of this evening and making the contact between the APEC Learning Center and Rabbi Tursky. I'd now like to call upon Mrs. Tova Weinberg, one of the founders or co-founders of the Soyuz Sinai, to give us some insights in her take on the mentoring and how we can get people together. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here. Maybe I do. First of all, I'm so honored to be on the same platform with Rabbi Tursky, an old and dear friend from Pittsburgh, and with Rosie and Sherry. Who am I to be here with such great people who've written books, and I've done nothing. Really just tried to make shidduchim. So I just want to tell you that, first of all, every pot, every top has a lid. Every lid has a pot. Everybody, nobody, everybody's going to get married. Everybody's going to get married. I promise you, it just takes time. But I want to say one thing, what we need. What we really, really need was you need all of you. We need an army of people making shidduchim. And I look around the room and I see a lot of people, but I want to thank, there are many shadchans here, but I want to thank 3 people in this room that have help me personally. One is Roz Elbaum, who, just know that, who started, who with 6 other women, all anonymously, started what is called the Katamon Connectors. Nobody knows who they are. I'm sorry, I gave you away, Roz. And what they do is they help the singles all over Israel. They altruistically open their homes for parties, for kiddishes, and none of the, all their kids, most of their kids are all married. They do it out of the goodness of their heart. Another person who opened their homes to help my singles is my longest and best friend, Phyllis Jesselson. Phyllis is here, who has been my longest and dearest friends. We grew up in Detroit. I begged her not to make Aliyah when she was 18 because she'd never get married. Oh, thank God she didn't listen to me because she married a great guy right here in Israel and has been here ever since. But she opened her home and we had a great party and people felt so good about themselves. And also another dear friend is here is Fegi Zakheim. Fegi Zakheim, who opened her house last December and had the most incredible party in Flatbush. I came from Pittsburgh, we had singles, and we had a beautiful couple getting married from it. This is what we need. Not only these 3, but every one of us, every single one of us has to be part of this army to help promote Shidduchim. What am I started this thanks to a woman named Else Benheim, who it was back in the late 60s and early 70s when everybody was, when the only place to be single, I was from Detroit. My mother says, I wasn't quite as lucky as Phyllis. I didn't get married when I was 20, but my mother said, get out, go to the Upper West Side. Rabbi Riskin just started this great, community, and you will find your besheret. And there I met Mrs. Benheim. Every Friday night, she had 60 single strangers at her house. She didn't know any of them. She invited them, and people came, and people met, and that's where I met her. And she said, I like your personality. How about if I finance all these parties, and you invite the people, and bingo, yes! So we started the Benheim parties in the early 70s. They were very popular until, thank God, Else Benheim moved to Israel. But she started me there, and I met this girl at a party. I said, oh my God, this is when everybody was hijacking and getting kidnapping, and I come up to this girl and I say, I have the greatest guy for you, my good friend Mark Goldenberg. And she says, I don't know you. I'm not into, how do I know that you're not an axe murderer and he's not a kidnapper? I said, you're right, you don't know. But she doesn't remember this, but I went on my hands and knees and begged her to go out with my friend Mark. And they did. And the next day, they called me and said, we're going to get married. And thank God today, they are happily married, and they always know that I always talk about them. Mark and Debbie Goldenberg, they live in LA. So what can you do? Do you know them? Yeah, good. My first show. So what can we all do to help everybody? Even singles can help. Even singles. First of all, we need to get rid of the mechitza, so we can all meet, okay? And all the singles, but that's okay. Well, that's another time. Every time you meet someone every time you meet someone who you think you can set up, write down their names. Write down their names. My husband started this for me. He wrote some computer program for me, and that's what I started doing. The number 2. Keep a list of everyone you know that is single and add to it as you get new people. Make a list for men and make a list for women and look at it every day. The most important thing is that you have to be proactive on behalf of your single friend. You have to be proactive. You meet a guy, oh, let's see, maybe they can be for my friend. Put it in. Everybody, it's a range. Well, how could you be for me? It's a range. Everything's a range. No one's specific. The Gemara says a woman could marry 200 men and be perfectly happy, and a man could marry 200 women and be perfectly happy. Make it work. Make it work. Be proactive. Number 4, be persistent. Always follow through. I have ideas in the shower. I stop, I write it down. I don't care what it is. I'll give you a story. Be proactive. The Gemara says, my brother, this was one Sukkot, we were Pesach in Detroit, and my brother meets this guy named Azaria Cohen. He says, he would be perfect for our first cousin, Eliza Mayerfeld. You do the work. So I did the work. I had just set Eliza up with somebody she probably never wants to go out again. Azaria never called me back. I worked months and months and months and months on the shidduch. They got married. Who got all the credit? My brother. Okay, it was his idea. You know what? Yetz Hashem and Shemayim. I'm probably going to get it. God's going to say, sure. Because it's the person who works hard on the shidduch. It's easy to have an idea. Everybody has it. Oh, man, idea. Go through it. Be persistent. Be proactive. It's very, very important. Now, this is not, so, I'm not into this, but number 5, put some thoughts into your matches. I mean, it does help to give some thought to it. It does give, as we all know, right, Heather? You got to give some thought. Heather is one of the greatest matchmakers in Meir Sha'arim, and I'm so happy, I'm so pleased that you're here. It's an honor to be with you. And number 6, be respectful of the decisions that singles make, and do not second guess them or give them unsolicited advice. Do not push them into dating someone they do not want to go out with, and never tell them, if you don't marry this person, you'll never get married. You know, don't do that. It's just like, it hurts. You can give them. Now, of course, there are situations where they have all these questions and they don't want her. I mean, you have to realize, I mean, when a woman says, the thought of kissing him makes me nauseous. Okay, you gotta respect that. You gotta respect that. You can't whitewash that. But there are other things you can, like, for instance, you can kind of refrain and rechange. Like, for instance, I can't believe he came to my date unshaven. He looked like a bum. What do you mean you look like a bum? This is cool. Everybody's now going for that look. The 5 o'clock look. I shaved. They changed their whole Yeah. So maybe he wasn't such a slob. You know what I mean? Well, that 5 o'clock shadow is a good look. Number 7, be discreet. You have to guard the privacy of singles that you're helping, and you mustn't repeat details. Especially, you have to be their confidant. You really have to be. And number 8, don't think you have to be a proven matchmaker to be a matchmaker. You know what I can't stand? I see people, I made a match, and it was the worst thing in the world. I'm never doing this again. What do you mean I'm never doing this again? They feel that because they made one lousy match, that they're not a good matchmaker. That's ridiculous. You keep on trying. You know how many matches I do? Somebody asked me, I do about 1,000 dates a month. And many of you can attest to that. And I am lucky if I make 7 shidduchs a year. I'm lucky. But I keep on trying, and I'm trying. So many people hate me. So what can I do? It is what it is. As long as my husband and my kids and my friends like me. I want to help you. I want to help you. But don't think because you made one lousy match that you're a lousy matchmaker. Keep on trying. People need you. People need help. Now, how do you make a shidduch? How do you make a shidduch? So you look at the person. You look at values. They have to have similar values. You look at their maturity levels. I can set up a guy who's 40, who's about as mature as a 22-year-old, and set him up with 20. It's a perfect shidduch. It's a perfect shidduch. It's mature, and you have to know these. Now, another great things about parties, because I live 60% of the year in Pittsburgh, and 40% of the year I live in Israel. I'm much more productive in Israel, where I can meet everybody. Who's going to meet me in Pittsburgh? It does help to meet people. It does help. But there's only 24 hours during the day, but it does help. For instance, I saw this guy, and he's so good looking, he's so handsome, I invite him to my house. I've been thinking about all these stunning girls I'm going to set him up with. Oh my God, he's so handsome, so bright. And he says to me, I have a secret to tell you. I said, oh, what's the secret? I love secrets. I'm telling everybody. And he goes, I'm attracted to fat women. Oh, I love you. He had to tell me that. It was very important. I would not have known that by his profile. Do you think he says that in his profile? And I set them up with somebody who's heavy, and they went out for a couple of months. And unfortunately it didn't work, but but now I know. But now I know what he's,
On his name.
So we have the similar values, maturity, religious observance. That's very important. Hashkafa, religious. You can't set up a conservative guy with a modern Haredi girl. You just can't do that. You have the hashkafas have to be similar. They have to. Many times I've set up Baal Tshuvas from birth. That's fine, but they have to be hashkafically on the same level, much more than personality. I look at my husband and I. If somebody saw the two of us, we have totally. I love to eat. He hates to eat. I love to bike. He hates to bike. We have totally different personalities, but we do share 5 kids and Baruch Hashem lots of grandchildren together, and that and we do like each other a lot. So it does work. So that has to share. Your shared values aren't as important, and your personality is not as important as your hashkafa. Now, another problem we have today with our singles, I'm finding them after doing this for 35 years, is I set up this guy, I'm not going to tell, whatever his name, Mr. Manny, and I set him up. He wants to go out with this wonderful girl. She's 37, he's 55. I kind of smudge about the ages. I do that a little bit, but I do a little bit about lying. But okay, we don't talk about that. But so I called him up after the dates, and she says to me, "You set me up with my dad. You set me up with a guy that's as old as my dad." I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." So the guy calls me up. He goes, "What, did she like me?" And I said, "No, she thought you were as old as her father." "What do you mean? What do you mean, my friends? They tell me I look so young. My friends say I have a great body, and my friends say I look so young." I said, "Yeah, what are your friends going to say?" "Well, your friends are going to, my friends are going to tell me, Tova, you're almost 60 years old, you look like 90. They don't know. They're my friends. They're not going to tell me, your friends are not going to tell you you look old. They're not going to say that. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. I suggest you get new friends." This perception of, and how do we cure this? How do we say it? How do we tell them the truth? And of course, what I have the biggest problem with both men and women is the physical look, whether they want a trophy wife or a trophy man. I have many women tell me, "I really think Brad Pitt is really handsome. Can you find one that says Tehillim? Can you find me a Brad Pitt? I just love that look." I know there are men out there, because I met them. I met them last year. I met a guy just like that, and that's who I want. And that's who and I find it very difficult, especially the older singles that are very set in their ways. But I do believe they are flexible. They come flexible. I want to tell you a story. My sister was 23 years old. She got married. She got divorced at 28. For 32 years, she looked for a man. All of a sudden, her son sees a guy across the mechitza who just lost his wife. And here I am, a matchmaker. I couldn't even set up my own sister for 32 years. And he says to his friend, he said, "That guy would be great for my sister." So the friend said, for my mother. And so her son said, so the guy says, "Have your mother call my wife, Mindy." So my sister calls Mindy up, and she says, "Yes, it's wonderful. He just lost his wife, but he's so da-da-da-da. And I have 8 other girls he's going out with. I'll put you on the bottom of the list." My sister, after 32 years, it used to be on the bottom of the list. She forgot all about it. 4 months later, Mindy calls back. They go out. From the day Mindy called, 7 weeks later, she was married. Baruch Hashem, she just had her 2nd anniversary, and she's still pinching herself. And I'm still pinching myself. But, this is what it's all about. So what my message to all of you is, anybody could be a shadchan, and we all have to be in this army of Hashem to make shidduchim. I give you another story. Every year I have a Hanukkah party at my house in Pittsburgh. What I used to do before when my kids were little, I did the non-from world. I did because they're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're very west, we're Ku Klux Klan, but there's a lot of intermarriage. There's a lot of intermarriage in Pittsburgh. And I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand it. So what I did was I started having Hanukkah parties in my home. So all of a sudden this guy calls me up, his name, whatever, Mark. He calls me up, he goes, I want to come to your Hanukkah party. I said, you want to come to my Hanukkah party? I said, do it with Betsy. What do you mean? You can't come to my Hanukkah party. You have to marry Betsy. I can't stand her dog. You mean you're telling me if she got rid of her dog, you would marry her? He said yes. I called Betsy up. I said, Betsy, Margaret will marry you if you got rid of your dog. I'll take your damn dog. I'll take your dog. I'll take your dog. But I'll take your dog. You'll take my dog? Yeah, I'll take your dog. Next day she brings me the dog. And we all went to the wedding, me, my husband, and the dog. It's a true story. Hashem, they're happy. They have 2 children. Now, another thing that Shadchanim have to understand is, I don't like to lie, but I met this girl last January. I was at a wedding, and I didn't have a place card, you know. So I was with my friend Phyllis, and I said, Phyllis, I'm gonna leave. She goes, you are not leaving. You are sitting next to me. And I was so afraid that I took somebody's spot. I didn't have a name tag. So I started talking to the woman next to me in the hopes that nobody would kick me out of my seat. And we started talking and talking and talking. And I said, you remind me of my dead friend. You know, Donna, I think she has a great husband for you. So, but I remember that my friend he wanted somebody 5 years younger because he just didn't want to marry another wife. Yeah, I understand that. And so I called him up from the table, from sitting there. I said, Victor, I have your wife here. She's fantastic. How old is she? I don't know. She looks like she's in her early 40s. She was 58. But they got married. Had I not lied about the age, had I not fibbed, you wouldn't have even gone out with her. Well, they didn't want to have any more kids. I mean, they have grandchildren. They want more grandchildren. So you have to know when to say it all. You have to know when to say it all. So in my hopes to all of you tonight is that we can take these 8 lessons that I spelled out to you, and really work on them. And we should all be in Hashem's army of helping to find shidduchim. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silver Weinberg, for your illuminating and very funny stories. And I certainly appreciate your passion and your commitment for the Shidduch process. And now I'd like to call upon Mr. Sherry Zimmerman, the author of many, many books, too many books to even recall over here. And I've been speaking to Mrs. Zimmerman and Mrs. Einhorn for the last couple of years about doing an event like this and other events. Without further ado, I'll call upon Mr. Sherry Zimmerman to give us the inside view on how to be a mentor.
How to be what?
A mentor. Thank you, Rabbi Myers, and thank all of you for coming. Thank you very much, Rabbi Tursky. Don't forget your book. Rabbi Tursky was very kind to give us a haskama on our book, Dating Smart, which I bought copies if anybody would like to buy them afterward. For 60 shekels each, and others, if you decide later, you can buy them in your local Jewish bookstore. And the reason I'm plugging this book is that if you decide that you want to become dating mentors, this is a really valuable tool for you to learn a lot about the dating process that I couldn't possibly go over in a few hours tonight and on Tuesday night. Rosie, my colleague Rosie Einhorn, she's going to be stepping out now because she is going to be presenting on Tuesday night when I am on a plane to the United States. So tonight's my part, and
First
Rosie
Sherry
will
and then
later.
And I'm going to see everybody.
Now, as much as Tova has told you about the fact that everyone can be a matchmaker and everyone should be, and she gave us a lot of ammunition for a couple of articles we've written for Eish HaTorah in the Jewish press, how Tova Weinberg says everyone can be a matchmaker. And she's absolutely right, but there is something very valuable that we need in this community as much as we need matchmakers. We need people to mentor singles. You know, you get in a car and you've seen people drive, and you've never driven before, and you think, oh, it looks easy. I went on bumper cars in the amusement park when I was a kid, and I always, go with my parents or my friends. When they drive, I'm going to get behind the wheel and go. And of course, it doesn't happen that way, because you're going to crash the car. You won't even know how to start it unless somebody gives you some instruction. Why do we think that we can just start dating and know what we're doing just because we watched other people? Now, maybe it worked 50 years ago, or even 40 years ago when I was dating, because a lot of people were able to build relationships that led to marriage and led to good marriage, and we had role models. Today, nobody knows what they're doing. And a lot of times people come together with pure luck. Pure siyata deshmaya, but certainly not because they figured out all by themselves how to have a relationship. So often, people need some wise person. Usually it's a married person who has some wisdom, has been through the process, or somebody who's been married and has, for the most part, had a relatively good marriage, who can help them along, has a different person's perspective. And so what I'm going to talk to you tonight about what a dating mentor does, certain qualities you need. I'm going to get to the point where I'll introduce you to part of the dating process, which is very important for mentors to understand. Rosie will pick up in 2 nights, filling in on the rest of the dating process, how people know when they're in a good relationship that's ready for marriage, how people make that leap of faith to getting engaged, and a lot of problems that crop up during dating that people are going to come to you about, that sometimes the solutions are counterintuitive. Sometimes things seem to make sense, but they're really, for example, I'll give you a counterintuitive example. If you really like each other and you see each other a lot, then it's going to make the relationship move faster. And the fact is, it usually doesn't, because at least one of the people dating needs much more time to process their emotions underneath the surface and to be able to go on with their normal lives while they're dating. And when you rush things, often things fall apart. So let's talk about what a dating mentor is. You're an advisor or a sounding board for a single person. And you really need to have a healthy perspective on marriage. I always tell people, and I've had people come to me and said, I've been making matches for a long time, or I've been actually guiding people, I just don't feel like doing it right now. Things are going on in my life. Am I right to take a step back? And I'll tell them, absolutely. If something unsettling is going on in your life, you're having shalom bayis issues yourself, or health problems, or job problems, and they are distracting you, then take some time off from mentoring, or don't get started. When your things are on an even keel, you're much better able to give emotional attention to a single who's dating. And you do not have to be involved in the shidduch itself in order to be a mentor. You can be the person who is called on as an advisor. Those of you who open up your homes to singles, maybe you have groups of them, maybe you have 1 or 2 coming to your Shabbos table, and you strike up a relationship with them, you're a great person that they can talk to. And sometimes what you can do is, if the conversation steers in the direction of what's going on in their dating life, or they make some comments, you can say, I find that sometimes people who are dating really need somebody that they can talk to instead of running to 5 million people for advice, because running to several different people for advice only makes you confused. If you would like to call me up, like to speak to me from time to time, please feel free to. I can make myself available to you. And that's a good way to introduce the subject. Rosie knows of a woman in Los Angeles who would watch this really nice man who lived a couple of doors away go on date after date after date, or date woman after woman, and nothing ever came of it. Then she found out that he had been set up with her friend's granddaughter. And she called him up and said, I think you're such a lovely guy, and I know that you are dating somebody who I think is very special. I think maybe might work out between the two of you. And I wonder if you feel that you need somebody to talk to about it, feel free to call me. And he did, and that shidduch ended up turning into a successful marriage. Those of you who are teachers, those of you who have contact at work with people who are single, and you feel comfortable enough to approach them, you can let them know, especially since sometimes they're going to be confiding in you anyway. Let them know that it's welcome. Traits that can make you a good mentor. By the way, a lot of you have the outline that I provided to Rabbi Myers. The reason I'm giving it to you is Rosie and I are giving you so much information that a lot of it is going to fly out of your head. If you have this as a reference, it might help you. I also want you to know I've given you a reference sheet. It includes Rosie's phone number, my phone number, and our internet contact through our organization Sasson V'Simcha, a way that you can reach us. We are very happy to talk to you. Many of the people who've gone through our mentoring training workshop call us up and ask us for advice on a difficult case that they have, or even something that they're not so sure that we said, and this is why we're here. We're here because we'd like to be helpful and we want to work together as a team with you. And Tova was talking about the fact that, once she worked on a shidduch idea with her brother, and it was his idea, and she followed through and did all the work. We're all in this together. This is all, I don't care who gets a credit for a shidduch. If I have an idea, or if I work on it, or if I mentor someone along, I think we all have a zechus in helping it come together, and the fact is, if it comes together, that's the most important thing. And for you to call us, for you to use us as a resource, that's what we want to do. Okay, traits that can make you a good mentor. If you have good insight into human nature, if you have common sense, you have to be discreet. You're not going to be sharing stories. By the way, if Rosie and I ever share stories with you, we completely obliterate people's identities, and it's mainly the fact situation that we share with you, or it's something where we have been given permission to discuss a situation by a client. We'll never give you the exact information because we respect our clients' confidences. And that's something that you're going to have to do. You're going to respect the confidences of the people who speak with you. You have to be open-minded and non-judgmental. You're going to be seeing people from all sorts of backgrounds, from all sorts of families. And it is, a lot of times people will come to me and say, I feel comfortable talking to you because I feel you're not judging me. And it's really important that people get this impression from you. I think it's also important for you to do reading. The information that we give over tonight and on Tuesday is very condensed. Rosie and I have a website that has a lot of articles. There are some good books, and we've given you some suggestions of books that can be helpful to you. One of the books, aside from our own Dating Smart, that I would heartily recommend is I Only Wanted to Get Married Once by Chana Levitan. I think it's an excellent book. I keep buying them because I give them to my clients, and they end up saying to me, all right, I don't want to give you back the book, so here's the money, go buy another one. So I think it's extremely helpful, and in fact, it's such a good book that it got picked up by Warner Books. And in America, you're not going to be able to buy it under Geffen Publishing. It'll be under Warner Books for a secular audience. But anyway, read and know and find out information. Your learning curve is not as steep as the learning curve of a single person. Most of you, I can see, are married. Most of you have been through the dating process. And a lot of you, I know there are a few social workers here, there's some matchmakers here. You have that knowledge. You're going to be able to absorb it a lot faster than a single who's reading Dating Smart or some other book for the first time. And because you've absorbed it better and also put your life experience together, you're going to be able to give it over to them. It's very important to be able to develop a positive working relationship with whoever comes to you. Now, there are all sorts of ways to be a mentor. I've had people, because I'm professionally, my history is I was a lawyer in America, and a good part of my practice was family law, including divorce. And when I came here and started working with Rosie, who's been a friend of mine since we were newlyweds in Elizabeth, New Jersey, started working with her with singles and decided to go back to school and get a counseling degree and incorporate counseling into my working with singles. And so people will often come to me, pay me for a session or two, troubleshooting or helping them with either dating in general or a specific situation, and then I make myself available to them on the phone. If they need another session, of course, they'll have it, and I'll charge them. But if they're in the process of dating and they want to touch base with me from time to time, they'll do so, and usually they just need, 10 minutes of my time. And I'm happy to do it, because that has led to several people getting married. Because, they'll call me up, and date number 5, 4 dates were wonderful. 4 dates really went well, the momentum was going really well, and date number 5 was horrible. Oh no, I've had this happen twice. Oh no. The end, they see the end. This is the beginning of the end, and they're despondent. And I said, what's going on here? You're allowed to have a bad date. You are? I said, yes, that doesn't mean the momentum's going to go down. You don't know. I said, I'll tell you what I've figured out, that usually if you have a bad date after several good ones, it usually means something else is going on in your lives. You think about, maybe you're sick, maybe there's problems at work, and each time they said, oh yeah, I had the worst week at work ever. You can't imagine, how bad it was. I said, well, you know what, that can make anybody off. You could have a cold coming on, you could have a fight with your sister, whatever it is. Each of these people, felt reassured, and the next date went on. One couple has been married like 3 years, the other one, God willing, will be getting engaged very shortly. Hopefully, these kinds of things are going to happen. You're going to get these phone calls, and hopefully you will be able to talk to people. It's very important that you create personal boundaries. By the way, this is important even for people who are doing matchmaking. I once met a woman in London who told me her phone is open 24/7 for people to call her. And I said, you're not going to be matchmaking that long if you do this. You have to have your personal time. I know Heather taught me this idea, because she told me how she'll take weeks off from time to time, not taking on clients and not doing matches, and then come back feeling refreshed. She has telephone hours. I don't know, do you still have telephone hours? Okay. Times when people can call her, and times when her personal life is her own. And you absolutely must do that when you're a mentor too. Singles don't understand the clock too well. I often have gotten calls from singles 2 hours before Lichtbenchen on a Friday or an Erev Yontif. Now, I can't deal with somebody Friday, 2 hours before Shabbos. And they don't have this idea. Okay. And also, your family life has to be your priority. You are doing a great chesed to other people, but there are so many different ways that you can make these priorities. You can have a separate phone line for people. You can tell them when they can and can't call. And if they call you at an inconvenient time, the line is, you know what, I see this is something you really need to talk about, and I'd really love to talk to you about it, but this is not a good time. Can you call me back at 10 tomorrow? Or can you call me back anytime tomorrow after 1 in the afternoon? Or, whatever it is, or do you need me to call you back? You have to make these boundaries. And you have to be discreet. Again, discretion is very important. And sometimes you're going to have to figure out when you can't work with somebody. Either you have very bad chemistry between the two of you, or you realize they are, I hate to use the word nutcase, but sometimes there are people that are clearly not well emotionally, and you really don't want to have anything to do with them, or maybe you have a real conflict. You have to be sensitive to the fact that as much as you may not like a person or may not be able to work with them, you're a human being, and you're going to be rejecting them. They've come to you for help, and they are going to be rejected, and you have to say it with kindness, and you also have to be very clear that you can't work with them. I once had a man come to me who he had a lot of problems. When I'd been in America in a community where Rosie and I had spoken, this was about 14 years ago, he was pointed out to us as, somebody very desperate who was approaching women half his age and chasing them, and that he had a lot of personal issues. And we saw him several times at other events in this particular city, and then he came to Israel, and he set up a meeting with me, and he didn't use his right name, he used a different name. It was the Yiddish version of the Hebrew name, or the Hebrew version of the Yiddish name, whatever. And as soon as I was walking toward the place where we were meeting, and I saw him in the distance, I realized who it was. And I sat and I gave him an hour of my time, because he had a lot of things he had to get off his chest. And then I told him, I can't work with you. I'm so sorry. I know you really need the help, but I can't work with you. And I actually told him more. I told him, you haven't answered, you've evaded every question I've asked you. You've told me things that, I know aren't true. And I can't have a relationship like that with somebody. And I'm really, really sorry. There are certain ways you have to let people down. Okay. You also have to know when you need to turn for advice to somebody who knows more than you. I suggest that everybody have a Rav that they can talk to when they have a shaila. And a shaila might be, how much can I fudge a person's age? There are halachas about this. Or other questions about, I remember a question somebody had, a halachic issue with dating somebody who was adopted and a giorus. And they had some questions, and they wanted to know how they can deal with it. You need a Rav that you can speak to, and you'll know when you have problems. You'll know when you just don't know enough. You may need a list of resources, a coach who can help people with dating skills, social skills. Sometimes you'll have somebody, there's a wonderful matchmaker I know in Telstone, who has sent people for wardrobe makeovers, physical makeovers, learning grooming, men and women both. And it's important to know that these people exist, and sometimes you're going to feel that you have to recommend somebody. So you should have a list of people that can be a resource for you. And when you have somebody who's socially awkward, they really do need to work on their skills. It's not going to magically happen that most of the time that they're going to meet somebody who's going to understand them and be patient with them. If they have serious problems with being socially awkward, they're going to need help. If they're extremely shy, if they have trouble opening up, they're going to need a little coaching. And if they are, mildly nerdy, that's fine. Mildly, I don't find that to be a problem. But there are serious social skills that need help. I once had a man who just couldn't make eye contact with anybody, and he exuded low self-esteem, his posture, the way he presented himself. And I urged him to try to get help, and he knew of a Rebbitzin, and he worked with her for a long time, came to one of our programs a couple of years later, honestly didn't recognize the man. I mean, he looked better, really good. He looked handsome. His bearing and the way he spoke to me was so different. I don't know if he's married today, but I know that whatever he did made wonders in how he felt about himself and how he projected. Sometimes people you work with are going to have to go to a therapist. And Rosie and I, whether we'll do it or we'll send to somebody else, we have a list of colleagues, and probably you may know some people yourselves who work with people on different issues. So I made a list that I'm not going to go over with you. It's in your outline. It's pretty self-evident. Sometimes you're going to see that somebody who is struggling with the same issue over and over again, or who has any of these issues that are listed on this outline, really needs help beyond what you can do. And you might want to call a therapist that you know who works with people, helping them with relationship issues, because sometimes it's just something that you can talk to them about and be able to do on your own, but other times you're going to really have to recommend to them. And I find that the approach isn't, oh, you're a mess, you need help, but that to find a way to build up a person and tell them how, perfectly nice, healthy, I often tell people, perfectly emotionally healthy people often get stuck in an issue, and they need some help getting over it, and often it's something they can't do on their own. If they're struggling with it, it might benefit them to get help. I would tell you that most of the people that are going to come to you are basically emotionally healthy, but there are some people who aren't, and they need much more help. And Tova said there's a pot for every cover and a cover for every pot. Some people are not marriageable until they get the psychological help that they need. And I really feel that there are some people who may never get the help that they need and may never really be able to be healthy marriage partners. Again, the vast majority of people that come to me for help with dating and decide that they want to work on particular issues, are people who are basically healthy people. There are some who have personality disorders. There are some who need medication in order to be able to function well, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be a partner in a healthy marriage. But a lot of the people that need a little bit of help from a therapist just need to get really some psychoeducation, some skills, some confidence building, and better ways to cope with your situation, better ways to open up, and things that you may not be able to help them with. Okay. The biggest thing that you are going to do for your singles is to offer emotional support, encouragement, and of course, guidance and advice. I may repeat this idea several times, but it's important to know that a lot of people need to know they are marriageable and that they're good people and that they're going to find somebody. There are, a lot of times when people come to you, they have already gone through a few years of unproductive dating. And they're so discouraged, and they feel that a lot of people feel no one's ever going to want them. And they've heard this message from other people, or there's nobody out there for them. There are so many people that I have troubleshooted with, and after they've had a session or two with me, they have a different outlook because they realize they didn't know what they were looking for. And for a couple of years, they funked around, really not knowing what they wanted, or looking for the wrong thing, or they're a very different person than they were a few years ago, or they dated for 3 or 4 years, not really wanting to get married, and now finally they're serious, so it's something different involved. And to be able to reframe their situation, to have them look at themselves in a more positive light, is really very encouraging and for them, and makes them feel better about the situation. But to have somebody who believes in them. A lot of people have said to me, you really believe in me, and it makes me feel good about myself. You believe that they're a good person. You believe that they can find the right person. You believe they'll be a good husband or good wife in a healthy marriage. They need to hear this from you, and they need to hear this encouragement. Or other things that you may have to do is help somebody who has issues with physical presentation, grooming, dating skills. I once met a man who came to me and I looked at the way he was dressed, and his clothes were really threadbare. And I was tormented. Should I say something to him? Should I say that when he goes on a date, he should dress a little nicer? I didn't know what to say, and I talked to a friend of mine who's the matchmaker in Telstone I referred to earlier. And I asked her, what would you do in this situation? And she said, I would very kindly ask to him, tell me something. Is this the way you dress when you go out? And have him answer, and then very nicely say, women, talk to him about what women expect, and that women feel that when somebody dresses up and feels proud of themselves or feels that they want to impress her, that she feels more positive about him. But these are things you learn along the way. So I'm giving you a little tidbits here and there that you'll learn and store it in the back of your mind and understand that these are things that you may be able to draw upon someday. If somebody needs help with grooming, there has to be a kind way to express that to them, express what people expect. I have a lot of times I will hear somebody say to me, they have to take me as I am. This is as I am. And you have to find ways in order to let the other person know that physical attraction is a very important element. But the main thing that I find works is that when somebody else feels that you're trying to impress them, that you're trying to curry favor with them, that you're trying to look good for them, they feel better. He wants to impress me, or she's really dressed up because she wants to, she thinks I'm important. It really enhances how the other person feels about you. I have one story. I have a few stories, but this is there's a couple that I know that when they got started, the woman was close to 30. She'd been dating for 7 or 8 years, no luck. She heard about this very sweet guy and decided she agreed to go out with him. When he came to the door, this is about 1980, so a lot of you were like little kids then, but probably heard of the movie Saturday Night Fever. Well, the man looked like a John Travolta wannabe. He wore a white suit, a black shirt open at the neck, and he had like big hair. And the movie was a few years old already, and she opened the door and she almost closed it because she was just horrified at how he looked. He looked comical. And she even toyed with the idea of saying, I'm not her, I'm her roommate, and your date is in the bathroom having a stomach virus. But she decided that, this man really tried to impress her and she realized he really dressed what he thought was in his best clothes, and that she felt it was not right to lie to him. And she went out with him and she just prayed she'd never meet anybody she knew. All right, they are married today, and because she realized he was such a nice guy and she would overlook the clothes. Now, I've been to their community for Shabbos a number of times. I've seen him, and he looks normal. He looks very nicely, neatly dressed up on Shabbos because she buys all his clothes. But the thing is, the fact is that, trying to look nice really makes the other person realize that the date is important. The date is important, and how the impression that you make is important to them. And I've had people tell me, and I wasn't so enthusiastic, so I didn't even dress up nice. And believe me, the other person kind of picks up on that, and they feel, they don't really want to invest in the date. So there are all different ways to try to impress upon somebody, how important grooming is and looking good. A lot of the people that you date, that you work with, have certain unrealistic expectations about marriage, about relationships, and I don't have to tell you what they are. You'll figure them out, and sometimes it really is important for you to discuss this. I once had a guy who was really terrified of marriage because he felt that you lose yourself in marriage. And we had to talk about this, and he realized, no, it doesn't happen. But he really thought you had to lose yourself in marriage. You had to do everything for the sake of your spouse. And I honestly don't know where he got that idea, because when he described his parents' marriage, it was very clear he didn't get it from that. But we had to talk about this. You are going to have to become familiar with the dating process, which I'll start to go into a little bit, and because your clients, they're not going to know how to build a relationship. They're not going to know the pace. They're not going to know what to expect. They're not going to know. I find, this is a generalization, but a lot of times I'll find, especially American modern Orthodox people, and you're going to have all sorts of people, a lot of the dating is fun, and there's not a lot of substance. And when they decide they want to get married, it's largely based on emotion, and they haven't really talked about important stuff. And now they're engaged, and they're finding that there are a lot of conflicts. They should be talking about this important stuff while they're dating. How they view the future, hashkafic issues, roles in a relationship, personal challenges that they have. They skip over it, and all of a sudden they're engaged in finding out they're in different directions. And I find that certain yeshivish couples are focused so much on the tachlis that they don't know how to have fun, and they don't know how to really develop a close connection with each other and feel a sense of friendship before they decide to get engaged. And afterward, or when they're about to get engaged, I don't feel anything. I don't even know if I like this person. So, there's a lot of psychoeducation and helping with misimpressions that is involved in being a mentor. Holding a single's hand, sometimes, especially during engagement, or when something is going, getting a little scary because things are getting serious, you might have to just be the sounding board or the hand holder for the single. You might have to do it when they've had a breakup after 5 dates of something that really seemed promising, and now the other person decided they don't want to continue, and they're devastated. You're going to need to be a hand holder and emotional support. And here's very important where those boundaries come in. You can't be everything for the single, but to have somebody there who really understands and empathizes and gives encouragement is important. And then you have to know when to go back to your own personal life. A lot of times you'll have people who say, I don't know if I know how to be married. I grew up in a home without shalom bayis. My parents had a horrible divorce. I've seen wonderful marriages with people who grow up without role models that they can emulate in their own families. But they have to work on it. And they have to know that sometimes they need counseling, sometimes they need surrogate families to be their role models. And there's something, by the way, that I feel that every single engaged couple should do. And marriage education. There are marriage education courses. There's something called Bechirat Halev here in Israel, Choice of the Heart, that Sherry Miller has developed. She lives in Katamon. There are a couple of other different similar programs in the Yerushalayim area where couples really learn couple skills, communication skills, the things that those of us who are married learned by trial and error, and sometimes there was a lot of error, and why not make that year or two of transition into being married much easier, because you go through. It really helps, it improves the quality of marriages, it helps people get on the right start, and there's something also very, very important here, and this I learned from Rabbi Twersky, because I remember he got up in a Nefesh conference in Baltimore many, many years ago to say that Chassan and Kala teachers have to do more than just teach halacha and how to have a physical relationship. They also have to teach how to have an emotional relationship. And I remember you saying this, Rabbi Twersky. You said something that if more people did this, you'd have you gave a percentage, and I don't even know what it was, much less problematic marriages. People need to know that it doesn't come automatically. Marriage, it means work, but there's also help out there. There's help, and that's why these courses and these Chassan and Kala teachers who are very, all-encompassing or holistic or whatever you want to call it, do wonders, because the couples know they have an address to come to, that there are ways that they can make things better. And it's so critical. Okay, I'm going to talk very briefly about the idea of a dating vacation. A lot of times, daters feel burned out. They've had so many bad dates. They've had so many disappointments, and they feel they can't go on another date. And even if they went out with Prince or Princess Charming, they wouldn't even know it, because they're just, And people say, but you have to get back on the horse when you fall off. Otherwise, you're going to be afraid to ride again. You can't date when you're burned out. Somebody who really feels like this needs to take a vacation from dating, and you can encourage them. I've had a lot of people ask me, I think I need to take a break. I said, if you feel that you need to take a break, it's a great idea, but you have to take a break the right way. You can't just say, all right, I'm not going to date for the next 2 months. You have to do something good for yourself to recharge your batteries. This means, usually to me and to Rosie, it means getting regular exercise, because it's good for you, makes you feel good about yourself. It also releases endorphins, which elevate your mood. Finding at least 2 things that you haven't had time to do, have always wanted to do, or feel that might be interesting to do, that will make you, to nourish yourself. And one of them, I feel, should be creative, and there are all sorts of ways to be creative. You can be creative with the performing arts. You'd be creative with, graphic arts, painting, pottery, cooking, developing a new video game. I mean, whatever it is that you feel you're creative, woodworking, it doesn't matter what it is. Take a course or start a hobby in this, and also do something else that you feel will nourish your soul. Take a course you always wanted to go on a vacation with friends. You set aside 2 months, 1 month, 3 months, whatever period. I usually find between 6 weeks and 3 months is good for most people. And you do this for yourself. You are not going to be dating. If people call you with shidduch ideas, you say, I really appreciate your call. It means so much that you're thinking of me. I decided I wanted to take a couple of months off from dating. If this person is still available in January, please think of me. And that's the way you live. You don't plan dates, this is it. You're really taking a vacation, and you're doing something good for yourself. If you help your clients through this, or help your singles through this, most of them are going to come back feeling really refreshed and more optimistic and really good about themselves. And I even know of people who have segued their new creativity into something more permanent in their life. One woman who started swimming, years later, she's still doing, she's still swimming and she feels good, and she's married. I don't know how that related to it, but it really helped her feel good about herself. Another person started flower arranging. Now, she is a professional with a degree, I'm not going to say in what field, and she worked in that field, but she took a flower arranging course and she started to arrange flowers when she went to her friends for Shabbos, and that ended up developing into something for Simchas. And while it opened up a whole new side of her, she really feels that helped her connect to the man that she married. And over time, that became her business. And the professional career is no longer, because she loves this flower arranging business that she developed. We have to encourage our daters to live fulfilling lives. Don't put off life just because you're still looking for your wife or your husband. There are things that you should be doing to enrich your life. Look good, dress nicely, go on that vacation that you really want to go on. Buy the condo. I don't know, in Israel, I don't know how many singles go and buy a condo, but I know a few different people in America who really decided they were going to, 29 years old, I'm single, I've got the money, I really want a place of my own. Thank God, that particular woman that I'm thinking about 2 years later, she met her husband. Why put your life on hold because you're single? You don't know how many years it will take. Keep looking, but live a full life. Sometimes you're going to have to help the people that you are working with deal with rejection and move forward. Sometimes they have to go through a mourning process if they've broken up with something they thought was a good possibility, or that they've been turned down a few times, and to encourage them to know that it is okay to feel bad, and it's okay even to spend some time doing this, but at some point you have to move forward, and if they need help, they may need to go to a professional who can help them with the process, and sometimes they just need you to validate the fact that it's hard, that they feel dejected, they feel down, they're going to spend some time feeling bad, and then they're going to start to build up and move forward. Now, this is something really helpful for everybody. There's so many people out there who really haven't a handle on who they are or what they want, even if they're 33 years old. They may be looking for the same thing they were looking for when they were 22. And their life has changed and they're very different. So, Tova mentioned the words, values and goals and hashkafa that are compatible and similar, and these are very important, but a lot of times people really haven't clarified it. We have exercises that are both on our website and also in Dating Smart that help people kind of do a cheshbon hanefesh all over again, even if whether they've never dated before, whether they've been dating for a while, to really figure out what's really going on in my life, what's really important, what am I really looking for. So many times you're going to see somebody who clearly is floundering, and they need your encouragement to do some of this work on themselves before they start dating. Skills for mentors. Some of them I've mentioned before, but I'm just going to go over them. You need to understand how painful it is. Those of you who got married after a few years of dating were lucky. And some of you probably got married after many more years of dating, and you know how hard it was. And those of you who got married really quickly, it's important to be able to empathize with what people are going through, how dejected they feel, and how scared they feel, because when I got married, thank God, almost 40 years ago, almost everybody got married. We all assumed we would find the right person and get married, and now there are so many singles that people are really terrified it's not going to happen. And if it goes on 2 or 3 years, they think, oh my God, something's wrong. I can't tell you how many people who've come to me, and when I talk to them, I realize they're doing everything right. They have a healthy attitude toward dating, and really, they just haven't met the right person. And it's just taken more than a year or two. Even sometimes more than 5 years. And there are others who really do need a little guidance. But again, sometimes it just takes time, and we expect instant, and people come to me after 6 months of dating and feel, oh my God, it's not happening. And who told you you're going to meet your bashert after 6 months? But people need encouragement, and you have to be empathic with the fact that it's very hard for them. And that's where your warmth and understanding and empathy comes in. Also, you have to understand your biases. sometimes they're going to get in the way of your counseling somebody because I'll give a perfect example. You are a young Colel wife, you and your husband are struggling financially, you have 3 little kids, you feel a little overwhelmed, and here's this young girl coming to you dressed in designer clothes and, bemoaning her chipped fingernail and the fact that, it's really hard for her. And, you're going to think, what kind of problems does she have? Why is she complaining to me about this? You have to be able to understand what your own prejudices, what your own biases are. How to raise difficult subjects with sensitivity. I talked to you a little while ago about that matchmaker who very gently would have asked the man with threadbare clothing if that's what he wore on a date, and if he said yes, to talk about how important it would be to have more updated clothes. Sometimes you're going to have to say something that might hurt the person you're with. I once had somebody who smelled. He didn't use deodorant, and he was sweaty. He came to meet me, and it was after a hard day of work, and I talked to him about this. I talked to him about the fact that a lot of guys, I didn't say him in particular, a lot of guys go on a date after a hard day of work, and they don't realize that maybe they need to shave that 5 o'clock shadow, and maybe they need to take a shower and put on a clean shirt, because a girl is going to look them over and feel if they came looking like they really had a hard day of work that they really don't care, and how important it is. I even had one guy who really had terrible problems with grooming, and I asked him, I remember Rosie did the same thing to one of her clients. I said, do you have a friend who you think is a really sharp dresser, really, has a good sense of, style that people think is put together? He goes, yeah, I have such a friend. I said, do you ever think that maybe he might be able to help you pick out some really good clothes to wear when you're dating? And he thought that was a great idea. When not to say anything, here's the biggie: wait. All right? We all have clients who are overweight. We all know people. I struggle with my own weight, but I have a lot of people I know are overweight, and they know they're overweight, and it's really hard to be able to say to them, you have to lose 50 pounds. That is like one of the deepest forms of rejection. If it comes up, if they talk about it, if they say, I know my weight is an issue, then they've opened it up. But you also have to deal with it with sensitivity. But you know how many women have come to me, and one man came to me and said, matchmaker said to me, I don't know if they use this language, don't come back to me until you lose 50 pounds. It's an insensitive way to talk to them. One woman came to me and she said, matchmaker looked at me and said, you're too fat, you're too old, and I can't help you. And let me tell you, she was not fat and she was not old. And she happened to have a great figure, and I don't know where this woman got it from. But it was like hurtful. So there are some times where it's better not to say anything, and you're going to have to see, how it's going to be receptive. But if you do it, you're going to say, I have to say something that is a sensitive topic, and I've been holding back, I've been considering it because I'm afraid it might hurt your feelings, but I feel that it's something really that I have to share with you. I care about you, I want you to succeed, and it could be, your teeth are very stained, and it's going to make a bad impression, or you have to deal with, a different kind of, issue, whether it's a physical issue or where they present themselves. And it's important to have listening skills, to be able to know when a dater just needs to vent and have you listen. And sometimes you have to ask them, you're having a hard time. You want me to just sit here and listen? You need to get it off your chest. Or would you like me to think of some ideas that could be helpful for you? And they're going to tell you what they need, or sometimes they don't know, so just listen and afterward ask them a question. Sometimes you're going to pick up on what a single is not saying, but they're really saying it. Like, they'll talk about all the people that rejected them and say there's no one out there for me. And what they're really saying is, nobody wants me. I'm a loser. And, they're not really saying this, but you kind of, with their words, but through their tone and their mood, that's what they're saying. And if you can pick up on this, try to talk to them about it and give them the encouragement and support that they need. Also, I mentioned something in the outline about hidden anger and bitterness. This has come up more times than I'm comfortable with. With people, when I speak to, I hear that edge and I hear that bitterness, and I think that is something that we really have to talk to a person about if that is present, that they often don't even realize it. I live in Beit Shemesh, and about 12, 13 years ago, we had a series of Shabbatones. I wish they would do more of them, because each Shabbaton resulted in several marriages. And the people who were participating would eat at hosts' homes, like, 4 or 6 men and women would eat at a host home Friday night, and then they'd have a big oneg and then meals together on Shabbos, and it was small enough that, there was a lot of work done to get the right mix of people. And one of the men showed up at my friend's home sooner after shul than everybody else. And she spoke to him for about 5 or 10 minutes before everybody else came, and she thought to herself, what a lovely guy. He shouldn't have any trouble finding somebody. And then the women showed up, and all of a sudden he turned into Mr. Hyde. Bitter, sarcastic, unpleasant. And she called me up and told me about this, and she, what should she do? And we talked that way, decided that people came by invitation. I suggested that maybe she try to find out who was the person who, invited him, and maybe that they could talk about this, or maybe she could talk about the man to what, she observed, because I don't think he was aware of this, and it certainly was going to get in the way of anything. It's something that he had to work on, and sometimes you have to be able to say this, and if it flies back in your face, it's like putting a stumbling block before the blind. If there's a really obvious problem and nobody is saying anything, then maybe sometimes you have to say something. You have to figure out a way to do it diplomatically and to show that it's with love and concern. A lot of you are going to be working with Balei Tshuva. Balei Tshuva who don't know anything about the shidduch system. And even if it's not a shidduch system where it's set up by a matchmaker, they're usually being set up by friends. They don't understand the importance of networking, checking out ideas, using references, and this is something you're going to have to educate your Balei Tshuva clients about. Also, a lot of times people really don't know. I have so many people come to me that have no idea how to present themselves. They have no idea how to describe who they are and what they're looking for. We even have mothers who call me up. You're not going to necessarily deal with mothers, but they'll call me up. I'd like you to help me find a shidduch for my daughter. I'm not a shadchan, but I can try to be helpful for you. Sometimes I know people, or sometimes I can send you to somebody who might be helpful. Can you tell me a little bit about your daughter? Oh, she's very nice. Okay. So it's important for people there's exercises, again, both on our website and in Dating Smart, about how people can develop a description of themselves. An elevator pitch. You know what an elevator pitch is, and if you don't, I'll tell you. You're on the elevator, the CEO of your company is with you, he's on the 20th floor, and you have about 1.5 minutes to get up there with him and tell him about this great idea you have, and maybe he'll like it so much he'll invite you into his office to talk about it. But the same thing, you're trying to network for somebody. Tova said, make a list of all the men you know and all the women you know, and try to be helpful to them. You also have to know something about them if you're going to call somebody. That you can stand on one foot and say something very quickly that captures certain important qualities about this person and what they're looking for. And then if somebody gets an idea, then you can talk further. You don't have to throw in the kitchen sink. Just enough to describe where they're holding in life, what they're doing, what they're looking for, and certain character traits that, might be important for somebody to know about them. And it's important for people, whether they're Balei Tshuva or not Balei Tshuva, to work on references, to know that there are people that can be called, to talk to the people, make sure they're comfortable being references, and to update them on what's going on in their lives. I had one man who gave me a reference. It was his mentor, his former high school principal who had made Aliyah. And a woman called up the mentor and called me back and said, he's got to get a new reference. Why? She said, because he told me that this guy really has got to get his head on straight. And he needs a woman to do it. All right, I don't want to put someone's head on straight. I want it on straight before I date him. I actually called the guy and told him, he started to laugh. He says, I know he was joking, but he probably feels a little bit of this is true. And he went, and found a new person to be a reference for him. Let's talk now briefly. I only have a little bit more time, so what I want to do is start you on knowing a little bit about the dating process. Because this is the most important thing that people are going to come to you about. How do I develop a relationship? What do I expect? So there are 4 stages of dating. Meeting each other, breaking the ice, getting to know each other better. And that whole process can take, for some people, 3 or 4 dates and 7 or 8 dates. I mean, there's no real formula. Building emotional intimacy, that's when a couple has decided, things seem to be going well, or I see possibilities, and let's learn more about each other, and let's focus more on, seeing where this goes. And the last stage is making the leap of faith to engagement and marriage. And I'm just going to talk to you about the preliminary stage, and Rosie is going to pick up on the rest, okay? Now, you're going to deal with a wide range of hashkafas. There's a lot of pressure in the yeshivish community to make decisions fast. 5, 6 dates, some 10 dates, and it doesn't work for everybody. I mean, it works sometimes when there's been a tremendous amount of research, and usually both sets of parents know so much about the other person, that's what's left is for the people to figure out if they're attracted, if they're connected, and if they're developing an emotional connection. But most people need more time because they have to learn more about each other. They're not going to be spending 4 hours getting information from a matchmaker who keeps going back and forth. It's just not going to happen. And so a good part of that beginning dating process is learning a lot of things about each other. And the emotional connection may start early, it may take a long time, but it doesn't matter, they still have to know more about each other. Now, the first date, I tell people that you have to think of it as an icebreaker and nothing more. And it should be short. It shouldn't be 4 hours. What are you going to say to each other? If you're lucky, things work well, and you have 4 hours of conversation, and then maybe on that second date you have none, because you've used up everything. You're really strangers, and you don't have that much to say. It's really better to have an hour and a half, 2 hours for a first date, and to figure that if it's parva or better to go on a second date, because you're not going to know this is the right one. You're not going to know at first date. You're not going to know at the second date. You're not going to know at the 5th date. Really, if you think it's the right one, what is it based on? The fact that you have chemistry? You don't know this person. So many people have come to me, oh, so excited, I met him, I met her, we're going out on 2 dates, 6 dates down the line, it's over, because they realize there were problems. You can't just, the chemistry is not enough to sustain a relationship. And also, things get off slow. How many of you had a bad first date with your husband or your wife? Or not a bad, I won't say bad. It was just a so-so first date. A lot of people. I know I have 2 married children who one side had to be talked into a second date. For whatever reasons, and they decided to go, and after the second date it was much better, and they kept going, and now Baruch Hashem, they're married, have a lot of kids, and thank God. But a lot of times people have to be encouraged because there's really nothing wrong. If there's no reason to say no, you go out again. I always tell people that you will know if something's really wrong. If you really feel uncomfortable with this person, you have negative chemistry, or they make you feel scared or not safe, trust your feeling. Don't go out again. If you're really uncomfortable with their appearance, you don't have to be attracted to somebody. Looks grow, and this is an important thing for most daters to understand, that attraction can develop over the course of a few dates. So you could just feel very neutral, but if you have a negative feeling about somebody's appearance, it's not going to change. These are good reasons. Or if you figure out a nice guy, but his hashkafa is way off, or she wants totally different things out of life than I do. these are signs that it's really not going to work out. And those are good reasons why not to continue. But if it's just neutral and the jury's out, you really need to go out 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 dates to try to get to know the other person better. First date, we have an article, there even may be some things in Dating Smart about this. There's also an article on the Aisha Torah website and on our website about things to talk about when you're dating. What are good topics to talk about in the very beginning? And what are good, important things to talk about as dates go on? We always tell people, find a purpose in each date. The first date's a very neutral conversation, but afterward, there's something even if you're going bowling or going boating or doing something enjoyable, there are things that you should be learning about each other in the beginning, and figure out 1 or 2 topics you'd like to talk about and make them the subject of the discussion on those dates. This is very important for women, especially professional women, or women who've gone to seminaries where, girls learning is really, really stressed, that, you are not having a job interview on your date. Men need to know this too, that they can't talk about their jobs in their life, job experience. Talk a little bit about your job, but show your softer side. Show the part of you that thinks things are beautiful, that likes to listen to music, that enjoys reading a good book, or even, playing a particular, sport occasionally. Talk about how it makes you feel, what it's like for you. People, they're not going to marry a chavrusa. They're going to marry somebody who, when they're upset, is going to give them compassion, and when they're tired in the middle of the night, is going to bring them a cup of tea before bed. And they want to see a softer side, and it's really important to encourage daters about this. There's a lot of early dating mistakes that you can help people with. People have an expectation they're going to get a click right away, it's going to be attraction right away, and as a divorce attorney, I had a bunch of clients who fell in love right away, and quick marriages and quick divorces, because they didn't let anything else grow. It was just infatuation. And most of you probably know this, but not all daters know this, that life isn't like the movies. And a lot of times it will take a while to get to know someone until you really feel, I'm really starting to like them and this connection is growing. Other early dating mistakes. First date, nice guy, trying to picture yourself married to him. That's, the date's over, the relationship is over. You can't project this. He's slurping his soup, she has a funny laugh, you're starting to imagine what it's like to be married to them, that's it. When my father met my husband, I'm glad I didn't take my father seriously because it would have scared me. He told my mother, Sherry's going to marry that boy. Now, I was 17, and I laughed it off. I said, Daddy, I'm only 17. But I've been 22, and my father would have said that, probably would have scared me, and maybe I wouldn't have gone out again. And, to project so far in advance when you barely know somebody is not good for building a relationship. People have questions, somebody says something and it's off-putting, a guy puts his foot in his mouth, a girl says something you think might be inconsiderate, you're willing to, ready to call it quits. Sometimes you just have to ask, what did you mean by that? Or, I don't understand, and sometimes it's just a misunderstanding, and it's important for people to clarify. A lot of people think if they date, they're going to Israel or they're going to America for 3 weeks and they're going to get set up with 6 people. And go one after the other. I had a cousin who used to do this. He didn't know which way was up and who was what at the end of this period of time, because it's just a bad idea. So sometimes you have to discourage people from doing this. A lot of people worry what their friends are going to think. They're going out with somebody that they like. I have had 2 women came to me with the same problem. Actually, I'm sorry, 3 women. They're all married to the man now. All of them were worried what their friends were going to think. They thought their friends would expect them to have somebody who maybe was better looking or more socially graceful. They were perfectly okay with the guy. One was a little nerdy, one was not as strong, not as muscular as her vision. And the other, I don't even remember what the problem was, but they were all worried that the friends would think differently. And I had a couple of men feel the same way. One man said, I'm so attracted to her, but I realize she's not the most beautiful woman I've ever dated, and I'm really afraid that my friends are going to see and think I didn't get such a good, catch and judge me. And you have to address this with them. I mean, it's a big mistake, and my standard, after talking about it, basically is the first time, maybe your friends will think that, but in the long run, when they get to know you and they see your relationship and they get to know the other person, they're going to see you as a couple. They're going to see them the way you see that person. They're going to, like them, and that judgment will go out the window. And really, what's more important? So sometimes they need a little help with this. And I'll tell you a big issue you're going to have with women who are older singles. A lot of women are always doing things to work on themselves. They're involved in chesed, they're going to the gym, they're taking a course, they make, advance their education. And some of the men who are their age or maybe a few years older who are still single haven't done that. It's like they've stagnated. When I work with men, I encourage them to develop more interest, to get involved in chesed, to do more than just go to a job and come home. And I encourage women to develop the conversation more, to realize that a lot of these men are diamonds in the rough, and that when you look at your friends and their husbands who seem very put together, that's through 10 years of marriage. You have to help them be put together, because in a good marriage we learn from each other. And that they were not the same guy at 34 that they were at 24. And the same thing will be with the men that they're dating. And this means a little bit of education, and it means a little of, dispelling certain myths. I'm going to stop right now because it's 5 after 10, and I think we said we're going to end at 10. I'll be around for a slight amount of time that you can come up to me afterward if you have some questions, and if you'd like to buy the book, I'm available too. Thank you very much. Don't forget your pen.
For the men who haven't done admirers, will be admirer after this right now. First, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank Rabbi Aaron Poston for setting everything up. I want to thank Rabbi Tursky for all his very great insights. Right there with the woman lead. Look at it, get on this side. I don't know what I'm doing here. Oh, right.
I'm supposed to turn this thing off. Here it is.